Good afternoon and welcome to the Building Podcast. Today we're exploring the role of the legal profession in construction. Our world is explicitly controlled by contracts, and contracts are generally the preserve of lawyers to help set up, interpret and occasionally enforce. Our industry has a love-hate relationship with the legal profession, often driven by poor behaviours and/or performance, both on and off-site. So I'm really pleased to be able to welcome both Ruth Griffin and Tresham to help us explore how to get the most from the legal profession and to understand the lawyer's role in driving both construction outcomes and efficiencies. Both Ruth and Jess are partners in legal practice Gowlings. Ruth focuses on non-contentious advice, whereas Jess focuses on disputes, and she's also the vice chair of the Society of Construction Law. So we've got two fantastic guides for today's topic. Good afternoon, Ruth and Jess.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the very generous introduction there. That's great.
Oh, not at all.
Hi, Mark.
I know you've earned it, but let's carry on. Let me ask you to give us a brief introduction to yourself. So I know both Gowlings, but Ruth, why don't you sort of tell us your background and what you're up to, and then we'll go to Jess.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Ruth Griffin. So I'm a partner at Gowling, part of our construction and engineering team. So we're one of the leading construction engineering teams in the UK. We focus on all types of construction engineering projects and we act for all stakeholders involved in those projects. What I particularly focus on, as Marcus said, is non-contentious work. So I'm a transactional lawyer. I've been a transactional lawyer for over 20 years. The only contentious work I've done was 6 months of a training contract. So, and I worked out quite quickly what I preferred doing. But that doesn't mean I don't speak to contentious lawyers. Actually, they form a really big part of our team. And I was really keen that Jess was on this podcast today because as a team, we work very closely together. It's like she's seamless. We understand that there's a whole life cycle of a project and that involves all types of legal support. So I spend a lot of my time drafting contracts, advising clients on how to get the best out of their contracts to reflect what they want to achieve from their contracts. I spend a lot of time in the market as well. That's how I know you, Mark, part of Constructing Excellence. The whole team's really embedded in the sector because we think that's really important to understand the challenges, the obstacles and the market that the construction and engineering players are in. So, but I'll hand over to Jess now to cover her experience.
Brilliant. Over to you, Jess.
Well, a lot of what Ruth said in terms of the Gowling business. I'm on the other side, sometimes called the other side of the coin, I suppose, in construction, in that I specialise in disputes, and in particular, we like to call it dispute resolution. So my job is to try and resolve disputes really before they get to court and you lose that control of decision making. So a big part of my job is advising clients from a very early stage when either firstly a dispute has arisen or that there might just be some whisperings of issues coming down the line. So we can get involved from a project, often even before a spade is put in the ground. I've been working in the construction sector as well for over 20 years. A lot of my practice concerns domestic market, but I've also historically worked internationally as well. I advise clients really across the full spectrum of disputes. It can be anything from defects claims to delay claims to issues concerning professional consultants, to anything involving fire safety these days, which is obviously very relevant. I've particular interest in renewables and energy. I've done a lot of work with clients across that sector as well. So it's a pretty broad practice. As I said before, we work hand in glove with each other because the drafting of the contracts and the risk profile of the contracts and issues that can occur is a service we offer our clients so that they have that full wraparound protection from their legal team.
I think, Jess, what you've done there is fairly neatly encapsulated just how complicated construction can be. So all those areas of contentions that you were talking about can be found on a single contract within the pages of a single JCT, can't they? And hence the role for the legal profession in trying to decipher and then enforce some of those terms that might be there. But
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Let's start with sort of asking. So in construction terms, we always ask for early contractor involvement. That's what main contractors and even the supply chain all like to have. And I know the same goes for the legal profession. So, but Ruth, do you want to talk about what the benefit of early involvement of the legal profession might be?
Yeah, of course. So it's quite interesting when I reflect on when we don't have early involvement. And the key point there is that you're trying to undo contracts and deals that may have been done that don't necessarily reflect what your client was intending or what they thought the deal was. And it gives getting us involved early is giving you strength in bargaining power, because from day one you are challenging what the proposed, well, I say challenging, but you are looking at what the proposed contract terms at the beginning of the discussions and stress testing and saying, does that reflect the deal that I think I've done? Our clients aren't lawyers. Our clients are focused on delivering an excellent project. They're focused on quality, they're focused on delivering to time, and they're focused on having a good commercial deal for both sides. But they need to ensure that therefore the terms that they're agreeing accurately reflect what they're intending to get out of the project. So I would say if you can get lawyers involved as soon as people start mentioning heads of terms, or they start mentioning what the form of contract might be, and it's about asking questions about what will the contract be, and start engaging. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to spend weeks and weeks looking at your contract. It means that I've got a heads up. I can give you some pointers. I can say, are you looking at this? Are you looking at that? I don't think that's the right contract. You said it's good. You've not got any design. Well, have they given you a D&B? Or so it's definitely forewarned is forearmed. So get us involved just to have those initial conversations. It's going to look like this. What road should we go down? When should I get you involved? To make sure that you are getting the best commercial deal. And also it's about risk management, and it's about making sure that you're not being asked to take on risks that you actually cannot bear because they're not within your control. Or if you are going to have to take those risks, because we do know there are sometimes a lot of risk gets pushed down for funding reasons, or that's just where it's got to go. You then are able then to put that in your pricing program. Again, it comes back to bargaining power. If you've agreed a price and you've agreed a program, and then you start looking at the contract and you realise you've got loads of risks that you cannot shift, then where is that going to go? And again, that leads into, are we going to end up in a contract that you started on day one that unfortunately you can't deliver on? And that's where it starts getting a bit. We start giving Jessica and say, how are we going to manage this? Because it's getting a bit edgy for us. So
that's absolutely right,
yeah,
isn't it? It's getting the foundations correct, Mark, really.
Yeah.
And what you've got to remember is the contract is just one form of protection for your business. So, there's other ways that you protect your business within a deal. The contract is a very important one, but, you also think about your insurance policies. You think about the appointments you might have with other professional consultants, and you think about perhaps bonds and guarantees that you might be giving. So often when clients come to us, they might have some outline heads of terms, and our job is to sort of talk them through the process and really look at that risk profile, because as Ruth said, when it comes to me, it's usually because somewhere along the line there's been a disalignment between what the client, or say you're acting for an employer in this scenario, what the employer thought they were purchasing and what the contractor thought they were delivering. So if somewhere along the line that suite of documents that you have as your wraparound protection has gone wrong, that's quite often the biggest cause of a dispute between the parties.
Yes, I mean, I always think the contract is there as to explain everybody's expectations.
That's right.
And you talk about risk. It's what risk do you expect to manage, and what risks are you expecting to pass through? And you're quite right, Jess. It's a suite of protections that are in place. Just come back to early appointment, though, Jess. Is it an oxymoron to say that you have a contentious lawyer appointed early, or is it possible to appoint a contentious lawyer early if you think you're going to get into trouble?
Well, look, I mean, a lot of our clients will look at seeking risk advice even before they enter into the contract. So you can start thinking about what the project specific risks might be, and they will very much vary depending upon what you're taking on. So, for example, if you've got a project that's particularly heavy on technology and ensuring that technology is installed properly and it's all new stuff, there's going to be more of a risk there for the client that you might need to sort of put the protections in place for them. Perhaps a more standard procurement of a development of, say, a hotel in Birmingham, for example, that is a lot easier, I suppose, in terms of identifying what the risks might be. So often getting dispute lawyers that specialise in these areas involved early can really help facilitate the agreements that my colleagues such as Ruth are putting together.
Yeah.
So we look at a project, and I think Ruth touched on it earlier in her introduction. We look at the whole life cycle of a project for our clients. What you don't want is just sort of parachuting disputes lawyers in when everything's gone terribly wrong.
Yeah.
In fact, what you want to be doing from a commercial point of view is making sure you're always looking down the line to what those issues might be and putting in adequate protections for them, or making sure you're putting those embers out before the fire really takes hold.
Yeah.
So I would say, and some might say, of course he'd say that, Jess, but I would say, getting that dispute involvement in early and through the whole life cycle of the project can really help deliver your objectives, which is actually, we want to deliver a fantastic project to time, without defects, and make a profit and walk away, because that's what the clients are focused on. And in fact, that's what we're focused on as well, is assisting them with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something which is really important to bring out, isn't it, Jess? That your business aspirations, your business model is repeat work with clients, and for that means successful projects. Your business model isn't not to take everybody to court, because that's a great fee for one off, but that's the end of a beautiful relationship potentially.
Well, indeed, and I can't even count on my hands now the amount of time said, Jess, it's been great working for you. Thank you. I hope I never see you again.
What lovely clients you have.
Yeah.
So, I think we both get that when the contract is done. And we'll just put that in the drawer, Ruth. I'm like, no, please don't.
Well, I mean, that brings me on to one of the things I know is a challenge in the industry is how should you actually engage a legal practice? Because in the industry we always try and work on fixed price for what we get, the services we're going to procure or the products we're going to secure, because we're on a fixed price generally upstream, and the lawyers are generally, we're not sure what service they're going to provide. So how would you suggest appointing a legal team?
But I mean, it sounds quite obvious, but make sure who you're engaging has the right expertise for your project. Yeah. It often, and this is fine, people will use the lawyer that they use for another aspect or a firm for their business, and they're specialists in that, and that's who they use day to day. So often you'll have niche areas sort of around employment or real estate, and then they'll ask for some construction support. And your existing lawyers may be able to help you and do want to help you because you have an existing relationship with them and they understand your business, but they might not necessarily have the market expertise. So have a think about finding the lawyers that have the expertise for your project. We completely appreciate the challenge around cost, but it comes back to when do you engage your lawyer, because you're actually mitigating your legal costs by engaging lawyers earlier, because you are going to get some input on the contract and whether it protects you and it does accurately reflect what you think you have entered you've entered into a contract for. But what's also really key is open and honest conversation. What is it that you want to get out of this relationship? What are the services that you provide? Being realistic. Is it the case that you have lots of other things around that are protecting you, the things that Jess mentioned, and what you just need is someone to have so we sort of like high level review or a gold standard review? Are we holding your hand all the way through this? Is it you just literally want me to flag you 20 things and that's fine and I will do that for you? Just really invest in that first meeting and that first conversation about what it is you want to get, and don't be scared of us. Please don't be scared of us. We really want to help you get what you want to get out of the deal, and be honest with us. Say, I haven't got budget for this, or we want to invest in this, or this is what we can get out of this, and what will this look like? So it is a case of think about who you want to use user-only recommendations, but take time. Again, bring the lawyers in early so it doesn't become an emergency purchase, so you don't have the time to have those conversations. And that's where things can break down in relationships, or there can be misunderstandings. If you haven't been clear from the start, you've gone, just review this contract for me, Ruth, and need it done in 24 hours. So, okay, that's not going to, let's pause, let's have a conversation. Yeah. So, Jess, I don't know from your perspective, when you're supporting on the claims side, what you find is the most effective way for engagement.
Yeah, absolutely, Ruth. I mean, just picking up on one of the points you made there, I think getting the right expertise is absolutely crucial, because from a disputes point of view, the lion's share of disputes around contracts in major projects relate to poor drafting because there's ambiguity. And that can be either because of the expertise of the lawyers carrying out, or quite often it's because of the level of instruction that those lawyers have had and the level of engagement they've been asked to put in. So it can often be, you get out what you put in. So if you're engaging a lawyer from a disputes point of view, again, you want to make sure that those lawyers have the expertise for that particular area of dispute. So you can have lawyers who are very sort of generalist litigators, and you can have lawyers that specialise in construction, engineering, energy type disputes. And because of the technical nature of them, having that level of expertise will really assist you in resolving the dispute early. And I said at the beginning, and I really do mean it, that the best part of my job is actually being able to resolve a dispute for a client without it costing them tens of thousands of pounds, and giving them a resolution that both parties can live with.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the challenges, I think, leading on from both your answers is that Ruth, you said most of your clients aren't legal and lawyer specialists. And we started off the podcast saying just how complicated a lot of construction contracts actually are. Is there any truth, or there must be some truth in saying that you need, if you're going to start a contentious argument, or you need that defence at the beginning, in your case, Ruth, that you need a legal practice that's got both the depth and the strength to be able to tackle all those issues? Or are you relatively safe in construction terms, depending on going to a sort of a smaller practice to defend you, which you might have more control or more relationships with those people?
I think it's important to get the right expert, unless when you go to that smaller, your regular supplier who's going to hold their hands up and say, I don't really know anything about construction contracts, but I can see there's cap on liability in here, or I can see there's this. Again, you're not going to get the expertise you need for a construction contract if you don't engage somebody who's used to dealing with construction contracts. So you get what you pay for. And I appreciate what you're saying, that it might not, but not all law firms are the same. So yeah, we are quite, we understand we are one of the leading law firms in the UK for construction. There are other firms that are who may have smaller teams, who may be able to offer a fee profile that is a bit more bearable, but you have to understand what you're getting for that. And I think for us, it's about building long-term client relationships. So it is about a repeat. So you understand, you start that relationship. It's like investing in anything. It costs you probably a little bit more the first project, the first couple of projects that you do. And then as the years go on, you just know that what that client does and doesn't accept. I never bother asking them on certain points, so I know what their position is. Or they just come to you for the bits where they've worked out they can do it themselves. I assume from Jess's, our contentious team's perspective, they have clients who are very good at saying, we feel like we've got something going on here, but we're not sure. Can we just have the hour conversation now? So I am going to say go to the specialists, but there are lots of very good construction lawyers out there. And I think it is important that if you're going out on a JCT or an NEC, someone has maybe a copy of that sitting in their library. Dare I say library? I don't know if anyone has libraries anymore in cities. But yeah, I think it is important.
I think what I'm hearing, Ruth, is something that my father told me when I first got involved in construction, and we were looking at a dispute and we were talking about fees. He said, if you think hiring a expensive lawyer is expensive, wait until you've hired a cheap one. And I think that's exactly what you're saying around about the experience that you need around some of these challenges.
Yeah.
Can I sort of come on then to Jessica? What are the key sort of failings you're seeing, you're defending at the moment? You talk around about words that haven't been put together, so clearly haven't been through Ruth's team. But what are the sort of the key areas that you're facing at the moment?
Well, yeah, we've sort of touched on poor and ambiguous drafting, but sort of moving on from that, I would say that misunderstanding of contract terms is often a key area for disputes, however well they've been drafted. So it's that understanding the deal you've done piece.
Yep.
Poor record keeping is probably up there on my list when we're trying to resolve issues for clients. And obviously you hear it said time and time again, which is records. And I always say to my clients, and we deliver a lot of training, that if you haven't got the records that show the cause, the effect, the entitlement, and then the substantiation, you're never going to be successful in your claim, even if you're right. If you can't prove it, unfortunately, you can get stuck with decisions that feel manifestly unfair. We touched on tackling issues early as well, Mark, and I can't stress enough for the purpose of this podcast how important that is. Having that early engagement, those early calls can actually help stop those hairs running before commercial relationships break down. In terms of what we're seeing at the moment, in terms of trends, I think project cost overrun is a big one. I think the cost of materials, the cost of labour are putting a real squeeze on the market, and in terms of the deliverables under the contracts and being able to keep things running in time to programme without squeezing that profit margin. We're seeing more and more underpricing, I suppose. So then the solvency of parties as well is becoming more of an issue. We're seeing more contractors go into forms of insolvency procedure now. And often when you start sort of peeling away the layers of the onion to work out what's happened, then it's usually a combination of underpricing, market conditions, and unrealistic programming.
I think, sorry to add to that, Jess, it's from my experience of being in the market, those that survive those who know their worth and are in market and have chosen the markets they want to be in. So it's valuing the service that you provide as a supplier so that you can go in robustly and say, no, this is how much it costs. We will deliver for you. And this is a realistic programme for that. And I think we hear too many times, don't we, Jess, where actually suppliers or contractors who've gone under are the ones that just took on too much.
Yes.
So they just take on too much. And I completely appreciate there are lots of drivers behind that for a business. But I think we can say that some of the tier one contractors now over the past decade who have clearly got their strategy and decided which markets they do and don't want to be in are the ones that are flourishing. And I say flourishing in the context of a sector where we all know that there, in terms of margins, it is always going to be, and it's going to be quite tight. And I think that's an interesting thing when you speak to others outside of the sector. They are quite shocked at how tight the margins are in the construction and engineering sector. And I think that loops back to your point about making sure you have the expertise. So if you've got a generalist commercial contracts lawyer that maybe doesn't appreciate that sector, they probably won't understand why it's so important, who's bearing the risk of where when it comes to delay, and when are those LDs going to kick in or not, or who's responsible for what under a contract, because it could put a supplier under.
And obviously you've got to think as well about, sorry Mark, I was just to add to Ruth's point is, you've got your disputes that might arise during the course of the project, but then you have a whole myriad of disputes that you see arising post practical completion, post defects liability period, and a lot of those relate to defects. And in particularly now, after the Building Safety Act was brought in, specifically in the domestic UK market, we're seeing more and more building safety related claims. And those building safety related claims are posing a heavy burden on both employers, so building owners, but also the contractors that may have completed a project well over 12 years ago, thinking, right, there's no liability now. Obviously, the Building Safety Act changed that and extended that period of liability so that that obligation to go in and remedy fire safety related defects is ongoing. And the cost of remedying those defects is substantial. You're always talking millions of pounds. So in terms of the solvency of the market, I think we will, as a trend, see more and more of these building safety related claims coming in, and unfortunately more contractors unable to meet their obligations and stay solvent.
It's a real challenge, isn't it? This retrospective nature of the Building Safety Act is exposing companies to risks that they never dreamt they were going to be picking up. And I think that's, as you point out, that the insolvencies or the additional costs that are going to be borne for that are yet to be really understood. I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you, Ruth, was, are you changing your contracts for your clients in line with the Building Safety Act?
Yeah, we are. So the sort of prime things that we're doing is people will be used to the roles and responsibility, the duties and competencies regime for the CDM. So it'd be the similar drafting around that. It depends whether it's a high risk building or not. But I think that's a bit of a misconception. People, I think, maybe still think that the building safety only applies to high risk buildings, or if it's a residential project. That's not the case.
No.
And also we're looking at dealing with limitation periods as well. Particularly, this is mostly when we're acting on the employer side, making sure those duties have flowed down. Making sure you have got a principal contractor and principal designer appointed. They're not one in the same as CDM, and looking at extending limitation periods so that we're capturing it so that it is flowing down all the way through the supply chain. So yeah, we are updating. I think where there needs to be most application of mind is if you've got a high risk building. But again, it's the same with CDM. It doesn't matter what I put in my contract. Deliver. It's statute. Have a look. What are your roles and responsibilities? Really important for clients. Are you delivering? Have you got the right people? So the industry has been here before with CDM. So hopefully, and there's still a lot that I think people need to be getting on top of. I understand that, but yeah, we are updating our contracts. But ultimately, follow what's in the legislation, understand what's in the legislation, and make sure that you've got people who are appropriately trained and engaged to know what you need to deliver.
And one of the things we do is we constantly monitor and review legislation and case law that comes out to make sure that our contracts are accurately reflecting the current position in law, and it does change more regularly than you think.
Yeah.
So it's really important as a team that we keep on top of that and update our clients accordingly with current judicial thinking.
Again, it's day one. What can we negotiate? Or is actually the job I want my lawyer to do is flag to me the risks so that I can appropriately deal with those in the project, or make an informed decision as to what's the one thing I would like to have changed in this contract, because I know I can't change lots, but this is where I think I'm mostly exposed. So often we'll do some of that for supply side clients, which is, I know it's not going to be negotiated, but could you please give me a review and tell me which bits I should be concerned about, and I'll make an informed decision as to how I want to manage it based on the risk profile of the project and the programme and how complex it is.
Jess, do you see, we've had, the industry, I think still operates under JCT, and something around it's 3/4 of all contracts are based on JCT broadly within the sector. I don't know if it always used to be, whether it's less than that now. Are you seeing a difference in sort of the level of disputes between the various forms of contract? I mean, NEC was brought out to try and simplify things and explain things in everyday language. Not sure it did entirely, but can you give a feel for where which contracts are less prone to dispute?
That's an interesting one. I mean, there's a whole separate conversation we could have about collaborative contracting, and does it really work? Does it really work? And I think a lot of it actually has to do with the mindset of the parties, because we've touched on it at the beginning of this call. And I like the analogy that you use, that the contract really is a set of rules of how the game is going to be played. But you can have a set of rules how a game is going to be played, but you can still play dirty. So I think in terms of the contracts themselves, I see a good mixture of all sorts of contracts: FIDIC, NEC, bespoke contracts, and JCT across the team. So we do actually operate across quite a broad spectrum. That said, I would still say that a lot of disputes are JCT, design and build, quite often type disputes. So it's a well-trodden path for the team in terms of the issues, how the contracts operate, what the clauses really mean. And then obviously you turn to those schedule of amendments that you've mentioned earlier, and often that's when I mentioned before, that's when usually the ambiguity will be found, because I mean, these contracts, as you say, NEC, JCT, FIDIC, they've all been around for so long in their standard form. Everybody knows what it means. It's when parties start to stretch the boundaries of those clauses and change them by way of amendments that you can get that uncertainty and disagreement. So I suppose short answer to your question is it's a mixture.
Right. Okay.
We see it across the piece, really, on all of the standard forms that we operate in.
Fine. So Ruth, would best practice then as a client be to talk through those amendments with their supply chain partners before signing, just so they're all explained? Or
well, I think it's a case of, it's quite interesting. It was interesting. I was talking to a non-UK based supplier a few months ago, and they were taken aback by how they spent hours in meeting rooms negotiating terms, they thought, and then when it came to it and they were presented with the contract, it looked nothing like what they just spent days. And I think it is a case of being upfront and saying, this is the contract we're going at, especially if you're, this is the contract we're going to go out on. Especially if it's all the subcontractors, because that's quite hard to manage as a tier one contractor, and say, this is the standard. I haven't redrafted it for you. Please have a look at it, and please let me know if there are any issues with it or any changes that you want to make. But early doors, as in get that out there in parallel with your commercial negotiations. But the amount of times I can be sent a subcontract by a client and I'll be like, it says design on it. Are you doing design? They're like, no. I said, well, send it back. So can we have the version that isn't designed, please?
Yeah.
So I think people, sophisticated businesses, I think it is just saying this is what we're going to go out on. Are you aware this is what it's going to look like, and will that impact your price and program? But you may say I'm a bit naive and idealistic, but the stress and the strain, the stress and the strain comes when the contract's presented and everyone's on site the next day.
Yeah. No, I've been there a number of times, and it's not pretty. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
I'm just aware of time. I'm just moving on. I mean, one of the rises we've had in the last 10 years is the rise of Google Law, where we can all pretend to know what the answers are to everything. How do you think the legal profession is going to change over the next sort of 5 or 6 years? Let's go up to 2030. We're all exposed to ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. We're all recognizing the value of those personal relationships you've both talked about on this call. How do you think that's going to impact on the legal profession in construction? Oh, now there's a big question. I've silenced you both.
No.
I was going to let Jess take that one because I'd taken the last one.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I mean, there's a lot out there in our industry at the moment about artificial intelligence, how law firms can capture it and use it to actually enhance the client experience and also enhance the work that they're doing. And I think technology is a hugely important piece in terms of how we deliver the work we do. Just the way that we're having this conversation now wouldn't have been possible probably 10 years ago.
No.
But in terms of AI and will it take over the place of lawyers, I'd like to say no, but I think you'll see more and more technology being used to help speed up the process, help inform the process. But particularly in relation to AI, it's only going to be as good as the information that's put into it in the first place. So that has to come from the lawyers themselves, that interpretation of the law and so on and so forth. But I think you'd be naive to think that you shouldn't get involved, understand it, start using it, start working out how to incorporate it into your business, because clients will be wanting to see that as well. And I could foresee in perhaps even less than 5 years from now, the speed of delivery will be expected to be so much faster because law firms are using technology in order to really enhance that process and get those turnarounds that Ruth was talking about, the 24-hour turnaround, a lot quicker by using AI in addition to the lawyer's expertise to get projects delivered quicker, project documentation delivered quicker. So I think the law firms that are jumping on the bus, it's something Gowlings are very much at the forefront of, will be the ones that survive and have that longevity for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm well aware that your conveyancing is exceptional because of the technology, the investments you made in your technology there, and it's something which we're very aware that helps your clients immensely in achieving that. I mean, I think one of the challenges with technology is how you communicate with it, and again, you've just both talked about the communication and personal relationships that you have, and that's all about human to human interaction. How do you see your staff coming through Gowlings as being able to communicate with the technology and making sure they're equipped to talk to the technology as well as to humans? Because in construction sites, that's proven to be quite a challenge. We've got people who are expected to use BIM and 3, 4, 5, 6 degree BIM at the same time as understand how to explain to the carpenter how he's going to cut the roof and fix the fascia. Are you experiencing the same things?
Well, no, I think we have the reverse. I think people coming to view are much better at using technology than I am from a personal perspective, which is great. I mean, on the point that Jess is talking about, we all deal with documents, and they're great at really quickly, if we're reviewing documents or we're comparing documents or DocuSign as well, all of those sort of things. So they're very on top of it. And then what's also really interesting is that for those who we so the way that you have the legal profession works, you have you tend, or generally you would have a 2-year training contract. And with COVID and being at home, I think they really value the personal interactions that they get from being in the office and working with senior people, listening. You forget how valuable it is to actually sitting in a meeting room and with other people and form those relationships. So I think it's not as challenging for us in the legal profession, given the example you've given around the extremities and contrasts. I think those coming through, we need to make the most of them to understand, so they can enable us who've been in this profession for many years or just that bit older, how you can get the best out of the IT, but also recognising as well that there is nothing like engaging with people face to face, or not just across email or having a telephone call, and giving them the confidence to do that.
Yeah. Well, I know that to get to your positions in Gowling's, you have to work pretty hard right the way through your careers. So I'm glad to hear you're going to make them talk to everybody and keep communicating up with people.
So at the next event you're at, Mark, I'll present you with one of our NQs, and you'll be very lovely to them, no doubt.
I'm sure I will be. We all started somewhere, Ruth.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to bring these people on. It's
yeah, definitely.
I tell most of my staff, if they haven't brought somebody on to replace them, they're not allowed to retire. The retirement age was abolished some time ago. Ruth, Jess, we've had a great canter through how the lawyers can influence and support construction. Do you want to finish off with just a quick few words on how you see your role, sort of how you can best apply yourself to the roles that you've got? I mean, we've covered quite a lot of it already, but if there's something that you'd sort of like to just sort of a call to arms for the industry, for your respective contentious and non-contentious positions, what would you like to see the industry doing? Let's put it that way. Do you want to go first, Ruth, or do you want to? Should we land that one on Jessica?
Go on, Jess. Let's take turns. Let's be fair. Here we go, and I'll have a bit of a think, and don't nick my idea.
Okay. So, what would I like to see the industry doing in terms of its engagement with the legal profession?
Well, what would your call to arms to the industry be from your position then? Let's keep it as simple as that. How would you like to see the industry changing? I mean, it could be as simple as I'm interviewing 2 women in construction at senior levels, and we just don't. Wouldn't have happened 10 years ago to say what we were saying about AI. It might be as simple as that.
I suppose I think the answer would be keep it commercial and pragmatic. Keep within the parameters of what is achievable. But also, I think, one of the wonderful things about construction across the world, and in particular within the UK, is that desire to keep improving and changing and adapting to the ever-changing political and social landscapes, to keep providing technology, infrastructure, buildings that are modern and have longevity. And I think it's exciting. It's one of the reasons why I like working in construction, is because of that tangible output. So I suppose if I was speaking to the employers and the contractors, is keep going, keep doing it, and we're here to support you.
Brilliant. Okay.
I think just going back to the point we talked about skills, I think we do know in the construction engineering sector we are lacking in the skills. So think as a business within the construction engineering sector what you can do to enable us to grow the skills within construction engineering, working in partnership with other stakeholders. So seeing how you can engage with the public sector, with the government. I do some work with CBI, and they advocate, they're looking at skills, working with local universities, skills suppliers. All businesses now are focused on what they can do around social value. And social value doesn't have to be big. It's what's the positive impact you can have on the wider community, the area that you work in. And if that is about allowing young people to come into your business and realise that they can become a builder, and they don't necessarily have to go down an academic route, then I think that's something that the construction and engineering sector can do really well at.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. We could have had a whole podcast on how you calibrate and specify ESG in your contracts, Ruth, but
Absolutely.
we'll leave that for another day. Plenty of room for dispute as well.
That for the new
year. Absolutely. Ruth, Jess, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been a fabulous sort of expose of how best to get the most out of your lawyers, how to get on with them early, and how to ensure that they drive value into the industry and into the projects we're working on. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thanks as well, Mark, for the opportunity. Good to speak to you.